Alô? Pronto. Isso aí.
Alô?
Boa tarde. Eu agradeço a presença de vocês. Agradeço também ao professor Stéphane Gioanni por novamente estar aqui visitando a Unicamp. É um colega querido. Ele veio a convite do Marcelo Cândido da USP, passou por lá, fez um curso, apresentou um curso, participou de um evento e está encerrando a participação dele aqui nas atividades acadêmicas no Brasil pela Unicamp. Professor Stéphane Gioanni é professor de letra e literatura da Antiguidade Tardia e Alta Idade Média, junto à Universidade de Lyon 2. Ele tem estudos numa área bastante peculiar e interessante, que atualmente ele trabalha com a região ali que a gente chamava antigamente de Illyricum, né? Então é uma região muito vizinha à Itália, né, mas muito especial nos processos de desenvolvimento, tanto no mundo antigo quanto na contemporaneidade, né? O professor publicou um livro que tem o tema da conferência de hoje. Ele vai falar, então, desse trabalho, que é, então, uma apresentação dessa pesquisa alentada que ele fez a respeito do papado, até a era gregoriana, e que é também um tema que eu acho que atravessa muito as pesquisas de alguns de vocês, né, de maneira dileta, mas a área de formação do professor é a língua latina, na Antiguidade Tardia e Idade Média. Então, é muito particularmente feliz ele estar aqui para falar dos estudos dele sobre escritas e textos no período de trabalho dele. Bom, eu gostaria de dar mais algumas informações. Os temas de pesquisa do professor, como eu já disse, versam sobre língua e literatura latina e médio-latina, epistolografia, patrística, geografia e coleções textuais, a história da Itália ostrogótica, das origens, com particular interesse pelas cidades de Pávia, Milão e Ravenna, história do papado, das origens à reforma gregoriana, que é parte do trabalho que ele vai apresentar hoje, história e historiografia do Adriático Oriental, ou seja, as regiões da Ístria, da Dalmácia histórica e da Croácia. Então, muito grata, a palavra está com você.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Professor Neri de Barros for inviting me and you for being here today. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here and to meet you. In this paper, I would like to present my own research on written sources of Eastern Adriatic. Written sources produced at the end of 11th century, at the time of Gregorian reform, a kind of medieval Romanization without colonization, but still a Romanization through papal power of Eastern Adriatic, also called medieval Dalmatia, which corresponds today to the maritime and coastal areas of Croatia, Montenegro, and North Albania. Dalmatia was in ancient time a vast Roman province whose capital Salona was the heart of Illyricum. Isidorus of Seville describes Dalmatia as a very large province. Ancient authors therefore associate Dalmatia with the territory of the Roman and Proto-Byzantine province that stretched from the river Mat, not far from Durrës in Albania today, to the river Racha in Istria, north of this map. Anonymous Greek geographical treatise from mid-4th century not only in its Latin translation, describes Dalmatia by referring also to the splendid city of Salona, capital. Medieval historians agree with this description. In the 10th century, Constantine Porphyrogenitus, the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, wrote, in ancient time, Dalmatia began on the borders of Dyrrhachium or Antibari and extended as far as the mountain of Istria, stretching as far as the Danube. All this territory was under Roman control, and this province was the most illustrious of all the western provinces. In the 13th century, Thomas the Archdeacon wrote a monumental history of the metropolis of Split Salona, which is the most important source on medieval Dalmatia, refers to the division of this region in two provinces. Lower Dalmatia, although known as White Croatia, because white means north, and Upper Dalmatia, also known as Red Croatia, because red is a geographical word which means south. And that's why this region of strategic importance was coveted by Carolingians, Venetians, Normans, Hungarians, and of course, papacy, who saw it as a gateway to the Byzantine area, but also to gateway to Central Europe and to Eastern Mediterranean. Very important, very strategic important. As this region has long been neglected by historians of early Middle Ages, I would like to show the interest of the Adriatic Laboratory for the history of the papacy's influence at the time of the break with the Byzantine East in the 11th century, when papacy tried to impose its authority on all religious and political powers through the so-called Gregorian reform. It is a very important moment for Catholic world in Europe and after in the world, because the other major religions, Judaism, Islam, and also Christians, such as Orthodox and Protestant churches, have never accepted, neither experienced such strong centralization of power by a religious leader. In this case, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who, through the Gregorian reform, sought to dominate all other powers, religious and civil, in a kind of pyramidal structure. These reflections will give us the opportunity to understand better the current historiographical debate in France, for example, between Dominique Barthélémy, Patrick Henriet, Michel Lowers, and Florian Mazel about Gregorian reform, and in particular about dominium concept. What does it mean, the word dominium? Which describes the forms of power and organization characteristic of feudal society, to the point of eclipsing sometimes the notion of seigneury, of which it became almost a synonym. As far as sources are concerned, I would like to mention two factors that contribute to the renewal of sources. First, there are a lot of digs, excavation, archaeological digs, which are very important to renew sources, material sources. And for example, you can see here the Monaco-Alais International Program on Monasteries of Eastern Adriatic, which I conduct with three archaeologists, Sébastien Bully, Morana Šaušević, and Pascal Chevalier, for 2021, in the framework of the French School in Rome, the French CNRS, and several Croatian and Albanian universities. Project, the aim of which is to organize conferences on this topic. For example, here in Lyon in 2022, and but also to try to renew these sources, and that's why a part of the team carries out archaeological digs, excavation studies. You can see here on monastic sites, also for produced in Dalmatian monasteries. And you can see here the last book, for example, that we published in April, St. Peter of Ossor, Island of Tres, and Benedict monasticism in the Adriatic area, that you can find online in open access. The aim of our project, you understand, is to better study, to better understand, and to complete sources already known, which have been published for the written sources in two fundamental works. Here, for example, left the Codex Diplomaticus Regni Croatiae, Dalmatiae et Slavoniae. All documents already known are published here. If you want to study this region, Eastern Adriatic or Adriatic, you have to read and to study in this book all documents. There are 18 volumes, very important. And you have read, right, les Regesta Pontificum Romanorum. You know, of course, the collection, very important, that regards all papal documents, region by region. And 2 years ago, the Regesta Pontificum Romanum for Dalmatia, Croatia, was finished and published. Now, let's summarize. Let's recap the written sources and above all the medieval chronicles. The most important is, as I already said, the Historia Salonitana by Thomas the Archdeacon. A vast chronicle recounting the succession of the bishops of Split Salona from its origin to the 13th century, like a Liber Pontificalis, but for the metropolis of Salona Split. The second important Dalmatian chronicle is the chronicle of the priest of Doclea. Doclea, south of Dalmatia. This work has long been interpreted as a medieval chronicle written by an anonymous priest from Doclea in what is now Montenegro, the capital of Montenegro, called Podgorica, toward making it the oldest South Slavic narrative sources. This chronicle is of direct interest to our subject at the point of view of the authors contrasts sharply with that of the first chronicle of that Thomas the Archdeacon. It could be said that these two chronicles, written in the two rivals of Doclea and Split, present two antagonistic views of the region's political religious history. And that's why it's very interesting to compare the two chronicles for same events. The influence of Historia Salonitana and, to a lesser extent, of Chronicle of Priest of Doclea on representation of medieval Dalmatia has had the effect of minimizing the evidence of chronicles produced outside the Dalmatian Crescent area. But there are a lot of other chronicles very interesting. The oldest and best known of these is, of course, the De Administrando Imperio, written by the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus, the mid-10th century, which was written in the middle of 10th century and devotes no less than 7 chapters to the history of Dalmatia and Croatia. Although Constantine's work is the main Greek source on Dalmatia in the early Middle Ages, in Central Middle Age, it will be interesting to compare the Byzantine emperor point of view with the annals of the Frank, too, written in the 7th and 8th century, and also to the first Venetian chronicles, because Venice was very present in this region. We will see it later, which recount and justify expansion of the Serenissima Venice into the eastern Adriatic. The oldest surviving example of Venetian historiography is the Historia Veneticorum, an anonymous chronicle attributed to Deacon John, a contemporary of Doge Pietro Orseolo, which bears witness to the close relations between Venice and Byzantium from a Venetian point of view, and was favorable to Doge Orseolo, who retired to lead an eremitical life at Utruxa. We should also mention the chronicle of Doge Andrea Dandolo, 14th century, one of the very first chronicles written by an important public figures in Venice, which tell us about the role of Venetian merchants in the balance of power in Dalmatia in the 11th century. After having presented briefly the main written sources of our research, we must now highlight a second very important point of our research: the renewal of the historiography of southeastern Europe. This region, which is difficult to define what it is, southeastern Europe, corresponds to what John finds in this very important book here, the early medieval Balkans, important for the renewal of this historiography. It corresponds to what John Fine called the early medieval Balkans, in a work whose first edition in 1991 was published at the same time as the disintegration of former Yugoslavia. After this, the books of Erwin Wolfram and, very important, Walter Paul encouraged research about origin stories, ethnogenesis, and acculturation of the peoples of Southeast Europe and the Slavic peoples, particularly the Croat. Ethnogenesis is very important. Now, I don't know if in Brazil it is also developed, but now it's very important, I think, for early Middle Age. By drawing attention to neglected regions, this historiographical shift made it possible to test, and this point is very important, to test the validity of models for analyzing the transformation of the Roman world. The works of Ward Perkins, for example, and the construction of European society, studied by McCormick, or, of course, by Chris Wickham, well known. In other words, the renewal of historiography of Eastern Europe allows us to rethink transition between antiquity and early Middle Age by showing the limits of a single model of interpretation. that would emphasize the role of a central power, that would emphasize to the influence of the Roman-centric authority, the needs of traditional elites, and the peasant mode of production, considered by Chris Wickham as the basic structure of the economic system. This model of interpretation, very important for Western society of early Middle Age, are very difficult to use for Eastern societies. Do you understand? That's why the renewal of historiography of Eastern Europe allows us to test this model of interpretation. New studies about Southeast Europe have shown the need of free ourselves from single model of interpretation and from traditional and academic periodization in order to grasp the diversity and dynamics of Southeast Europe society. In a recent book, the archaeologist and historian Florin Curta, and you see here the two main books of Curta, Curta stresses the importance of a new historiography moment and the importance of a long 6th century, 6th and 7th century, which characterized by a demographic crisis in the 7th century, by the abandonment of major ancient cities, such Salona, the capital of Dalmatia, and by an economic and social discontinuity that differentiated Balkans from neighboring Western regions. These preliminary reflections show that the societies in Southeast Europe, through their diversity, cannot be regarded as simple periphery of Rome or Byzantium. They also invite us to reconsider traditional representations of Eastern Adriatic. Should we speak of a border region, a border march, a buffer space, buffer spaces, which are generally marked by border toponym, such as krajina, meaning border in Slavic language, and designating now border regions in now Croatia, Bosnia, Poland, or also Ukraine. Ukraine means also this kraj, Ukraine. These spaces are never empty spaces. Territories are fabrics of development, as writes Pierre Toubert. Fabrics of development where the strong powers multiply the signs of their presence, which are stagings that make these border areas of zone of over-investment of the presence of big powers. Through the network of fortifications or monasteries, or through the development of a culture, a spirituality, or a common memory in which language or the cult of saints play a major role. From then on, borders cannot be seen just as limits, as barriers, as places of confrontation or conflict, but rather as a privileged place for exchanges, in particular economic, technological, and cultural transfers. In short, we could present this region as open world, connected to Mediterranean world. A common ground, to use the concept of the middle ground, an intermediary place between cultures between peoples and between empires. A place of interpenetration of different worlds. This interpretation of frontier space doesn't exclude strategies of domination and conquest that seek to assert authority or influence. It does, however, allow us to pay close attention to the process of accommodation, acculturation, and integration that encourage the standardization of lifestyles and cultural, linguistic, and liturgical practices. Considering now the Eastern Adriatic, as we just said, as place of encounter, not necessarily desired or peaceful, of course, helps us to better understand the stages and consequences of the gradual extension of papal authority in Dalmatia, which became one of the very first laboratories of the Gregorian reform in the Mediterranean of 11th century. As the region is not very well known, maybe I will record very shortly the history of Dalmatia from late antiquity to 11th century. Particularly favored by the imperial aristocracy, Dalmatia enjoyed a long tradition of Roman culture and settlement. Numerous urban structures can still be seen in Salona, Zadar, and Narona, where Latinized communities mingled with the local population. In the 5th and 6th centuries, the evolution of social organization in the cities led to the gradual disappearance of municipal institutions, to emergence of groups of notables, and also to the increasingly important role of the bishops. For centuries, Dalmatia had provided the empire with resources, income, and troops. It included a network of military garrison and forts that formed part of a system of fortification and signposts on the Dalmatian coast and island often attributed to Justinian's time. The many Dalmatian islands, there are 3,000 islands in Dalmatia, provided natural protection, and it's a very important point, natural protection, offering a place of retreat, ascetic retreat, or even a holiday resort for coastal dwellers, also in late antiquity. Some islands also served as maritime stations, such as Saint-Pierre-d'Ilovic here, or as relates for the tax authorities, such as the island of Miette, that you can see here. At the beginning of the 4th century, Emperor Diocletian, himself of Dalmatian origin, reformed the territorial administration, attaching the province of Dalmatia to the diocese of Pannonia, called the Diocese of Illyricum. And later, imperial power ceded the Diocese of Illyricum to the Eastern Emperor Theodosius II in 425. It is the reason why Dalmatia became increasingly autonomous from Ravenna, the new capital of the western part of empire. And during the last decades of the Western Empire, the pagan count Marcellinus, Comes Rei Militaris in Dalmatia, revolted against the Emperor Valentinian III, established an autonomous power in Dalmatia, and isolated more and more Dalmatia from Western Empire. The Italian clergy's distrust of the Greeks And conversely, the East suspicion of the Church of Rome, now located in Partibus Barbarorum, in barbarous regions, fueled tensions in late antiquity between the two shores of the Adriatic. It is the geopolitical context of late antiquity. This geopolitical context evolved during early Middle Ages with the arrival of the Avars and Slavs in Dalmatia. But while Thomas the Archicon of Split in Historia Salonitanari, you remember, describes the fall of Salona because of the Avars, archaeologists show that the city was never destroyed, but only abandoned in the first quarter of the 7th century by its inhabitants, who took refuge a few kilometers to the south, 7 kilometers to the south, in the former palace of the emperor, the Dalmatian emperor Diocletian, which formed the heart of the medieval city of Split. And you can visit it if you go to Split, one of the main cities of Croatia today, which is really very good conserved because of this, because it was the heart of the city. Considering now the geopolitical context and the arrival of the Slavs in Dalmatia in the 7th century, Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus, 3 centuries later, was the first to recount the myth of the migration of white Croats. Right, do you remember now? White Croats from the Caucasus to Dalmatia through a region today where is Ukraine Croats. In reality, there is no textual neither archaeological evidence of the presence of Croats before the 9th century. Now, historians reject the idea of Croatian migration, and define Croats not as an ethnonym, but as a social group originally formed by the border guards of the Avar Empire, who only developed into an autonomous ethnic group in the 9th century. The scarcity of sources mentioning the Croats before the 10th century is evidence of the difficulty this ethnico-political community had in asserting itself as a group due to its heterogeneity and maybe to internal struggles. We can conclude this point saying that material and textual evidence confirms the cohabitation in Dalmatia of two forms of Slavic and Romano-Byzantine culture around 9th, 10th century. But it's very difficult to say more things. While the Byzantine Empire organized the Byzantine province of Dalmatia, the word, the administrative word is, to call this province is theme. We speak about a Byzantine theme. With Dadar as its capital, while the Byzantine Empire organizes Byzantine administration, Byzantine province of Dalmatia, it seems that the authority of Croatian dukes developed in the 9th century, and we find for the first time the mention of a Croatian kingdom in 925 in a letter of Pope John X to the Dalmatian Croatian king Tomislav, the first king of this Croatian kingdom. A Dalmatian Croatian kingdom run by the Tirpimirovic dynasty until the end of the 11th century. It is very difficult to describe the extent of this Croatian entity, which was initially limited to the court seats scattered across Dalmatian territory. It's impossible to do. I take this photo in a book, but I think it is wrong. Why? Because we are in a province of the Byzantine Empire, and we have seats in this province of Croatian Dalmatian Kingdom, but we are still in the empire of Byzance. You understand? That's why, okay, there are seats, several seats of this kingdom, but not a territory. What is wrong in this map is the red line. We should just point the seats of the poor. I don't know if you already met this kind of situation. It's very interesting. That's why the Byzantine Empire accepted it. They never accepted to give a part of the empire. No. Very important. Further south, in Upper Dalmatia, Constantine Porphyrogenitus mentions several cities administered by other Slavs in the region of Doclea. You see, maybe Doclea. Now is the capital of Montenegro, Podgorica. And Doclea was the capital of the second kingdom, of this kingdom, including the city of Kotor and the kingdom run by another dynasty, not the Mirovic, lower Dalmatia, but now South Dalmatia, Vojislav dynasty. These two dynasties, always in the Byzantine Empire, it's difficult to think this, which were, in a sense, how can we call them? Vassals. Two kingdom vassals of the Byzantine Empire, with which they maintain relations of submission and rebellion, had to contend with the ambitions and threat of neighboring powers. For example, Doge Pietro Orsello expedition to the Eastern Adriatic at the end of the 10th century was followed by several campaigns that allow Venice to consolidate its control over Dalmatian ports and cities, in particular Zadar. But I think it was a chance for the two Slavs dynasty, always in the Byzantine Empire. It was a chance. Why? Because their new relations with the Romano-Byzantine elites and then with the Doge of Venice helped it to strengthen the visibility of the two countries and to strengthen their power in Dalmatia. But the Slav rulers of Dalmatia, of the two dynasties, benefited above all from the support of the papacy. That saw the region as a gateway to Byzantine area, to Central Europe, and to Eastern Mediterranean in the 11th century. And I would like to close my speech by taking a look at this particular moment. I mean the construction of the Gregorian world, which is called Gregorian reform, which expressed an universal ambition and imposed the Pope authority over Dalmatia, and which was, the Gregorian reform, a frontal attack against the political religious collusions dating from the Carolingians, where institutions and church property were largely controlled by secular authorities, while the clerics, from the Pope and the bishop to the country priest were subject by customary law to the authority of the emperor, the king, the prince, or the lord. The Gregorian reform will and wants to destroy this kind of construction, Carolingian construction. This is a fascinating example of the relationship between a global ambition, papal ambition, and the local powers during the Central Middle Ages. Very interesting to reflect the rapport between global and local. The story of the relations between Dalmatia and Church of Rome allows us to understand better this particular link between Dalmatia and papacy, which explains, for example, why today Croatia and Dalmatia is the only Catholic country in Eastern Adriatic, alongside Orthodox and Muslim countries. The origin of this is this period that we are studying. An apostolic legend from the 10th, 11th century explains that St. Peter himself sent his disciple Domnio to Salona, the ancient capital of the Roman province of Dalmatia, to evangelize the region. And it is well known that such legends, called apostolic legend, very important. We can find apostolic legend in South France, in South Europe, in Spain, and we have the same thing here in Dalmatia. It's not a rare example. This kind of apostolic legend were used by papacy during 10th, 11th century to legitimate its own authority and to build a papal monarchy, which was, of course, very important in a region, remind this, always belonging to Byzantine Empire. This is also the case here, as this legend appears at the end of the 10th century, beginning 11th century, but not before. Saint Domnio was indeed a bishop of Salona. He did exist, but he fell victim to Diocletian persecution in 304. He was not a disciple of St. Peter in the 3rd century. The apostolic legend completely reconstructs the history of this 4th century bishop. In reality, the first evidence of the relationship between Catholic Church of Rome and Salona appeared in the 3rd century with the election of the Dalmatian Pope Gaius. The Liber Pontificalis also mentioned an early Roman mission that led to the martyrdom of Saint Venantius, but it is difficult to distinguish between history and legend in these accounts, which are fundamental to understand the origins of Christianity and the worship of the Dalmatian saints, whose relics Pope John IV, himself of Dalmatian origin, had transported to Rome after the fall of Salona, or the abandonment of Salona in the 7th century, to the chapel of Saint Venantius in the Lateran baptistery in Rome. And you can see this famous mosaic in the choir, which represent all saints of Istria and Dalmatia. Although papal letters of Gregory the Great at the end of the 6th century expressed a great confidence in the metropolis of Salona, the Arian temptation of the Church of Salona and the independent attitude of several bishops of Salona gave rise to tension that culminated in the schism of the 3 chapters in the middle of the 6th century, when the Church of Salona chose the side of Byzantium against Rome. The abandonment of Salona at the beginning of the 7th century did not put an end to the difficulty for papacy in exercising its authority over a region marked by Eastern influence and desire for autonomy. However, after the abandonment of Salona, the papacy seems to strengthen its influence over the region, seeking first to impose authority of its own metropolis, the metropolis of Split, but also by spreading Roman liturgy, as shown here, through Split Evangeliari here with Roman liturgy, but also by sending letters and papal legates to the Dalmatia to convince political and religious elites of Dalmatia, Croatia. But tension persisted during the first century of the Middle Age, despite some successes and active papal diplomacy. But we can affirm that the papacy achieved its objectives to extend its authority over Dalmatia in the second half of the 11th century, when two Slav dynasties of Dalmatia agreed to pledge their allegiance to the Pope, who, for his part, agreed to recognize and protect them. First, in 1075, the papal legate of Pope Gregory VII crowned the Croatian king Zvonimir. You remember the first dynasty in Lower Dalmatia, at the gates of ancient Salona. And it's a very important and symbolic place to record ancient Romanization of Dalmatia. As you can see here in this bas-relief concerning Split, that you can see if you go to Split. And second, 2 years later, in 1077, the king of Doclea, the second dynasty, Mihailo the Voislav, received a crown from Pope Gregory VII, who called him the Christian king of the Slavs. You see, it's very important for the two dynasties. This very small dynasty, which received crown and were called king of the Slavs. They strengthened their visibility. On receiving their crowns, the two kings swore an oath of loyalty to the Pope Gregory VII and his successors, thus becoming the first vassals of papal monarchy. The Gregorian world was born. Papal primacy had just invented a system for subjugating local civil powers, protection and recognition in exchange for protection on earth and in heaven. That's why I presented in the title the Eastern Adriatic as Laboratório of government reform of Pope Gregory VII, which was a frontal attack, as I said, against the political religious collision dating from the Carolingians. The representation of this very important moment are very suggestive. And for example, here, the coronation of the Croatian king Zvonimir by Gelizon, the legate of Pope Gregory VII, you can see it shows the papal legate left with a Benedictine monk. You see here with the tonsure, like Pope Gregory VII, former abbot of Monte Cassino. You can see the papal legate here at the same height, same level, same height as the king on his throne on the right. The first time in history of representation of coronation. Very interesting. And we can know all that precisely because we are very lucky. We have a letter of this king, of the Croatian king Zvonimir to Jelism, the legate of Pope Gregory VII, after his coronation. Zvonimir, indeed, writes that he became king. You have here the Latin text. King by the grace of the Apostolic See. He described himself as, I translate, Dux of Croatia and Dalmatia by the grace of God, but made Rex king, by standard, sword, sceptre, and crown. The terms used, the prestige of the royal office and the mention of the vexillum conferred by the apostolic legate, embody the protection of St. Peter. Following the example of the vexillum Beati Petri that Pope Adrian had given to Charlemagne, Zvonimir proclaimed his devotion and loyalty to his Pope, Neo-Papae, and successor in his legate. The words are very important. They express clearly the supreme sovereignty of the Pope. And they express the famous reductio ad unum that the Gregorian reform had just completed in 1075. I remember that the coronation happened in 1070. That's why it's a laboratory. Zvonimir also made major donation, in particular incredible donation of the royal monastery of St. Gregory of Rana, the Church of Rome. Rana is in Russia, of course. Thus, and please listen, integrating into the patrimony of St. Peter, into the patrimony of Roman Church, a monastery and its lands, which I will remind you, were part of Byzantine Empire. It's very incredible. I think it is like a stroke of political genius. Thus, we can now sum up the main instruments of its policy can be summed up as follows. First, an institutional and diplomatic level with embassy, apostolic correspondence, decretals, council under the authority of the metropolis of Split, impose Latin and Roman liturgy, and to centralize papal authority through an archbishop of Split, representing the Pope. Second level, spiritual level, with the legend of apostolicity, attributing evangelization of Dalmatia to a disciple of St. Peter. We have also the spread of cults and worship, celebrating papal ideology, I mean the worship of Holy Virgin, St. Mary, and of course, we worship the cult of St. Peter, the first Pope. Third level, a political level, I mean the collaboration with the Slav dynasties of Dalmatia. And fourth, the monastic, very important monastic and cultural level, through the Benedictine expansion under the influence of the Abbey of Monte Cassino, South Italy, and Pomposa, founded by Romuald, North Italy. In fact, this new link between Rome and Dalmatia reveals the essential role played by the Benedictine networks under the influence of the abbeys of Monte Cassino and Trinity. Monastic foundations multiplied, particularly on Dalmatian islands, as part of the extension of Benedictine monasticism, and Camaldolese order, a monastic order of pontifical right founded by Saint Romuald who founded in particular the famous monastery of Pomposa, one of the art of the Reform monasticism. The German historian Wilhelm Kurze, very important if you study this monasticism in Italy, for example, played the rise of Camaldolese monasticism precisely in the territorial framework of the monastic and Gregorian reform movement. He studied its gradual transformation into a powerful congregation and its extension far beyond the Italian peninsula, and for example, Eastern Adriatic. All this foundation benefited of support of the papacy, of the metropolis of Split, and from the second half of the 11th century, with the support of the Slav dynasties, who made a lot of donation, money, land, island, treasures, to the Benedictine monastery. And you can see here from the mid-11th century, at the moment when he understood that the collaboration with papacy could be very important for their own power, their own visibility in this Byzantine Empire. For example, you can see here two of these monastery. Why this monastery? I chose this because there are two monasteries that we visited as part of our project that I mentioned in the introduction. Here, for example, you have the monastery of Ilovik, and here you have the monastery of Saint Peter in Osor, with the photo of the dig and the reproduction. These monasteries were very important in helping to spread ideas of reform in the 11th century. They also played a role very important in cultural exchanges with the great Italian abbeys, the Abbey of Monte Cassino, the Trinity Abbey, and they also spread the first Romanesque art, very important, the Romanesque art, and facilitated the worship of Virgin Mary and Saint Peter. In Dalmatia, they also spread the use of a scriptura, called the Dalmatian Beneventine script. You can see here a script originating in northern Italy from Benevento, but used in Monte Cassino Abbey, Trinity Abbey, and in the Benedictine Abbey of South Italy. Used in this very important abbey of South Italy, but also, you see, in Dalmatian. It's a proof, it's an illustration of the cultural exchanges between monasticism and monastery of South Italy and Dalmatia. You can see, for example, the famous, I don't know if you already learned paleography, but you can recognize several letters. But here, for example, you see the A, it's typical of this that we find on the two shores of Adriatic. Finally, we can say that Dalmatian manuscripts also contribute to the cult of Saint Benedict and Benedictine culture, which was one of the main vectors of pontifical ideology in the 11th century. As you can see it in this manuscript, Evangelii of Osor, North Dalmatia, in Kvarner today, put the motive of beardless Christ, which is one of the figurative model of Reform art. You can see the valorization of Benedictine and papal culture also in the first book of Hour, produced for the monastery of Saint Mary in Zadar, which contained the portrait of Saint Benedict, described in Benedictine script. You can see Benedicti Abbatis, Beati Benedicti Abbatis. To conclude now, I will, to conclude, underline three elements. First, we thought that the papal Romanization, this Romanization without colonization, invite us to ask again, but what is Rome in the Central Middle Age? Is it an idea? Is it a power? Is it a world view? The Pontifical Rome is certainly all these things, as it has always been. But Rome has become, first and foremost, a global way of reading history that tries to integrate diversity, docile diversity, and to subjugate local powers and cultures by making them speak the same language, by making them share the same Roman worldview. In a certain way, it reminds us why pagan Rome in antiquity had been very reticent about accepting Christianity, thinking that the Christian Rome that banned other cults would be giving up the foundation of Romanity. I mean, its political, social, and religious capacity for assimilation, which was obviously a strategy of domination. I think that the Gregorian reform raised the question of the assimilation of local powers and cultures by inventing a new form of power, a government that gave great importance to the written documentation, decretals, chronicles, Roman pontifical, it's a kind of documents, etc. In a way, the pontifical chronicles, which insert the government of the world into the course of Christian world history, from Genesis onwards, did invent a form of global history, maybe for the first time, in a form of globalization, or rather an ambition for globalization that deeply changed the perception of the local, which becomes part of a role, I mean the Catholic and Roman world. Second point of my conclusion, Dalmatia example gave us the opportunity to understand better the current historiographical debate about Gregorian reform, and in particular about dominion concept, which described the forms of power and organization characteristic of feudal society, to the point of eclipsing the notion of seigneury, of which it became a synonym. It showed that the transformation of the rules governing the ecclesia by the ecclesiastical institution led to a recomposition of social relations within the dominant groups, with consequences for the dominated. This evolution was accompanied by procedures designed to order society. But to order society means to include, but also to exclude all those who challenge the new order, the effects of which were very real. But be careful, by contrasting a church for and a church against the feudal powers, some historians always see this entity, ecclesia, as a subject outside society. I think that the Dalmatian example showed that there is a need for a history of the church in society, as Michel Loers and Florian Mazel found very good. If not that of a church society, it's very important. The numerous donation of Croatian king and Dalmatian Croatian aristocracy to sustain monastery and Roman Church show the various social and economic consequences on the entire society and power of the region. And third and last point of my conclusion, Dalmatian example shows that Gregorian reform changed the paradigm of relations between a center and peripheries. There are no longer peripheries, I think. There are no more peripheries. There is only a center, but a center that integrates local diversity and claims to extend to the very limits of the world. What pontifical sources call the reductio ad unum, that the Orthodox churches and the Reform, Protestant Reform at the end of Middle Age will never accept. And I think this explains why the Pope is at home everywhere in this world. As illustrated, for example, by the first visit of a Pope to Dalmatia, more precisely the solemn entry of Pope Alexander III on a white horse into the Dalmatian capital, Dadar, but also into Dadar Cathedral in 1111. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Eu agradeço muito ao Stéphane pela apresentação. É surpreendente como a gente pode descobrir sobre tantos tópicos relativos tanto ao mundo antigo quanto à reforma, que tem esse papel original, né, na Idade Média Central, a partir de uma região que a gente entende completamente fora da esfera desses poderes e o quanto a nossa imaginação fica agraciada, né, pela oportunidade de pensar as coisas de um outro ponto de vista. Então, é muito interessante. O tópico da reforma sempre me fascinou muito e eu vou falar daqui a pouquinho em francês com o professor, tá, gente? E eu acho que a gente teve, né, no Brasil, a tese do Leandro Rust, que teve um grande impacto, que teve uma perspectiva, acho que válida, dentro de um certo quadro, né, de preocupações, mas eu ainda resisto muito a abrir mão do conceito de reforma. Acho que ele ajuda a gente a entender coisas demais, organiza muita coisa, né? Bon, je voudrais que vous commentez un peu, s'il vous plaît, surtout à propos de, tu as parlé de territoire de l'Empire, on parlait de la papauté, un dialogue qui dérivait de l'autorité, mais comment ta connaissance de cette large période, c'est une aventure importante, genre de l'aventure intellectuelle, de connaître une période aussi longue, et comment tu vois la relation de la papauté avec l'idée même de l'autorité impériale. À ce moment du féodalisme qui tu destaques à la fin de votre exposé, comment c'est possible de voir quelques changements de la politique expressés par l'initiative de la papauté d'exercer déterminés éléments qui caractérisent non seulement les pouvoirs, mais l'autorité publique de l'empereur, parce que je pense que nous travaillons beaucoup avec une idée de supérieure qui n'est pas celle-là du monde ancien. Et je parle de la culture commune, de la manière comme les personnes communes voient l'histoire. Je pense que nous pouvons apprendre un peu sur ce caractère si nous pensons à partir des sons, sa expression en autre champ, avec la fragilité même du pouvoir impérial. Nous avons à travers du pape quelques expressions de ce pouvoir que vous pensez que c'est décisif dans cette relation que vous étudiez. C'est la question, c'est clair?
Oui, it's I try in English or in French? Maybe. Thank you very much for your question. It is a very difficult question because very important question, but difficult because the answer will not be the same for the end of the 5th century, for the Carolingian period, and after in the 11th century. But it's true that the papal history and the papal ideology considers the relations between the authority of the Pope and of the civil power as a point essential. And for example, for the first time at the end of the 5th century, the Pope Gelasius wrote very important text about this point. What kind of relation can be between the bishop and the king? And we speak about Gelasian doctrine. And he speaks about a complementarity of the two powers, called for the bishop and the pope the auctoritas, and for the king or emperor the potestas. The relation between auctoritas, ecclesiastical auctoritas, and civil potestas are very important, and the couple bishop king is at the origin and one of the basis of the development of the kingdom after the fall of the Western Empire. This is absolutely fundamental. But if you go several centuries later, for example, in the 11th century, the Gregorian reform changed at all this equilibrium. Why? Because the Pope is above all power, ecclesiastical, religious, or civil power. And it is a point. It is this new world, this Gregorian world. And speaking about the relation between Pope and Emperor in this period, we all know the difficult relation, the tension, very, very hard tension between the Pope and the Emperor. And you know certainly the excommunication of the Emperor who didn't understand the new power of the Pope and who refused to accept this kind of power. He was excommunicated, and after he understood that it was wrong, the wrong attitude, and he vowed to ask pardon. It is a canosa. In canosa, it became an expression in Italy to say this expression, andare a canosa, means to ask help. That's why we can't give the same answer for the end for late antiquity and this moment, the essential new moment that is regularly found. It's very important.
Alors, je me permets de vous poser la question en français parce que je ne comprends pas très bien c'est-à-dire, je comprends parfaitement l'anglais et j'ai compris tout ce que vous avez dit, mais je ne débrouille pas assez bien l'anglais. Je préfère le français. Alors, ça a été magnifique parce que vous avez parlé d'une période que je ne connaissais que guère, c'est-à-dire, et surtout la région, l'Illyrie, la Dalmatie, c'est une région que je n'avais pas vraiment étudiée. Mais d'abord, j'ai deux questions en fait. Au début, quand vous avez montré les cartes, je voyais très bien la relation entre l'abbaye de Mocassin et quelques monastères partout en Illyrie, en Dalmatie. Ça m'a attiré l'attention au début parce que je pensais toujours à ce qui est un peu au-dessus, la Pannonie, en fait. Et donc, d'abord, je voulais vous demander si, dans toutes ces sources, parce que vous avez montré plusieurs sources que vous connaissez, que vous avez sûrement lues. Donc, je voulais savoir si dans toutes ces sources que vous connaissez, que vous avez lues, s'il y a quelque chose que nous pouvons savoir à propos de relations entre l'Illyrie, la Dalmatie et aussi la Pannonie, parce que à la fin, quand vous avez parlé du rapport entre Grégoire VII et Zvonimir, ça m'a semblé beaucoup le rapport entre Sylvestre II et Étienne Ier. Et après, je voulais savoir aussi si il y a dans l'action, dans la politique de Zvonimir, qui est vraiment très intéressante le côté droit, parce qu'il a vraiment adhéré à la politique du pape Grégoire VII, surtout. Donc, s'il n'y a pas de son côté une intention de s'écarter de Byzance, c'est-à-dire il adhère parce que ça ne m'a pas été, je n'ai pas compris vraiment cette partie-là, il adhère à la politique de Grégoire VII justement pour s'éloigner peut-être de Byzance, et comme ça, il devient un peu indépendant. Et aussi parce qu'on voit ces genres de rapports aussi entre Grégoire VII et un peu Ladislas Ier après. C'est ça ma question. Donc, ces deux questions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Deux questions yes. I try to answer in English. I'm not sure that Zvonimir was so happy, I don't know if Tirpemirovich dynasty was so happy deciding to collaborate with Pope, because the kingdom of Croatia was born at the beginning of 10th century. And we are the first coronation of a Croatian Dalmatian king in 1075. Almost 150 years after. I mean that Tirpemirovich dynasty didn't agree with Pope diplomacy during 1 century and 50 years. Do you understand? The beginning of their relation, even if papal diplomacy wanted to be accepted by this dynasty didn't accept it, and they waited. They waited almost 150 years. You understand? But at this moment, this dynasty, but also the other dynasty of Upper Dalmatia, they understand that the papal power could help them to strengthen or to have more visibility, more autonomy, and maybe to be compared to the most important king or emperor of the history. When Zvonimir wrote, "I became Rex, swore by vexillum," we all have in mind when Pope Adrian gave vexillum to Emperor Charlemagne. This very small king of Trpimirovich is compared to the most important emperor through this word, through this interpretation. And he understands that having this kind of relation and submission to the Pope is a way to become more powerful, more and to have more visibility. Do you understand? It's like we say that last day, win-win. Papacy is accepted in a region, in a province of Byzantine Empire. It's they achieved its objective. They tried for 5 centuries. Now it's good, but on the other part, these very small dynasties, they became existent, they became strong, they became visible, accepting the power. And it's incredible. And for example, at this moment, they understand that it's a submission, but it's a mission that gives power. And for example, in this text, they helped monasteries, they helped Roman Church, they did a lot of donations, but they donate and they give parts of territory of Byzantine Empire. This part of Byzantine Empire are not Croatian, because there is no Croatian territory. And this donation is just a piece of paper. It is nothing. But if I said, I give this monument to someone, for the other person, they think that I was the owner. You understand? They give island, they give a lot of things to Rome, to patrimony of St. Peter, but they are all pieces of Byzantine Empire. No, it's incredible, and that's why in French I imagine this title, Gouverner par l'écrit, gouverner le monde par l'écrit, parce que c'est pas du tout la réalité de leur pouvoir qui les a rendus plus pouvoirs, ce sont tous ces écrits, this written world of imagination. But after, the power and the visibility became real. And you are right, I agree with you, it's also a kind, this visibility more important, the power more important, allow these two kings, it is through dynasty, to become more independent in front of Byzantine. It is true. The problem for me, as I said last week, is how and why Byzantine Empire let it happen. The heart of the problem. You understand? And I spoke with a lot of specialists, Byzantinists of specialist empire, as Vivian Pujan is a specialist. And for them, it's very interesting that because they didn't know the specificity of Dalmatia. And for them, it's a proof, just a proof, that Byzantine Empire in certain provinces and regions was very low, faible, with faible administration. We understand, and for example, for the tax and the fisc, they let Croatian king to receive the tax. By their have not the ways and the person and the administration to impose their authority to take this tax. Thus, there are two solutions: the conflict with dynasty in their empire is a problem, or let it happen to develop this kind of relation between the empire and its vassal. And they did prefer that. That is very interesting. Oh, excuse me. I don't know if you have those.
Thank you, Professor. I have just one question for today. I was thinking, is there any relation, did you see any mention in the documents of this period to the Great Schism of 1054, or the controversy or the double excommunication 20 years before, or not?
Excuse me, I didn't understand very good.
Okay, I repeat. Is there any relation in the donation of the monastery in 1075 and the coronation with the Great Schism?
With the
Great Schism between Leon IX and the Patriot, and
I understand.
Okay, you do understand? Yeah.
Oui, tout à fait, tout à fait. It is a problem because I think that this schism didn't exist in reality. Didn't exist, and there are, maybe there are a lot of articles now. They explain this. It is a reconstruction. And from historiography, from late Middle Age, Orthodox historiography. But what did happen in 1054? Nothing. Nothing. Because we have, after collaboration between Byzantine Empire and Pope, after this we have a lot of collaboration. It is not a schism. There was a problem during an embassy. Just this. It's not a schism. But after, and several centuries after, it was a representation to explain the break, the division of Christian Europe between those who followed the Pope, the new conception of the power, this theological power, and those who didn't accept it. But in reality, there is no schism in 1054. It's very interesting. If you are interested by that, I can send you bibliography like that. There is a article from Chile.
Hey, thank you, Professor. I have two questions and they kind of connect with each other. Because when you spoke about the global perspective of this context,
I didn't use the word
yes,
local.
yes, but but it's kind of connect. It's not clear to me the local dimension because, as you said today in the previous course, it seems more like a Gregorian colonization of Dalmatia rather than something like there's something like coming from both sides, you know, the Dalmatian side and also the Roman side. And it seems to me like, what was the answer from the Byzantine Empire? They have an answer to this kind of people coming from the east. And my second question is, can we follow the idea of crusade by Jean Faury and understand Dalmatia as a place where the reform and crusade meet together in the east, like not the war itself, but people coming from the east to the west? Thank you.
Yes. For the first question, no, there is no reaction of Byzantine Empire because I think they don't have way, they don't have possibility to react. They want to keep this region very important, of strategic importance in peace, because are they low, are they weak in a situation of war, of conflict, it could be a defeat, and they could forget this regime. It is my interpretation. That's the hypothesis, and the explication of specialists is to my question is to answer in this part. All these prove that the Byzantine Empire was weak, was very low. First point. For the second point, could you repeat this?
Yes, yes.
No, yes, the Crusader. Yes. Do you think to the example that we showed and read 2 years ago, two days ago? Yes, but it's later. It's 1 century later, because during the Fourth Crusade, it's an incredible thing. The Crusaders allied with Venice, went to Jerusalem, but they did a first stop in Zadar, capital of Dalmatia, that Venice wanted to subjugate for 1 century. What did they do? They destroyed Zadar. Crusaders' army and Venetian army destroyed this capital of the Catholic and Papal world in Dalmatia. It's difficult to understand this. And the incredible thing, because we studied this example 2 days ago, was incredible, this example. Pope Innocent III saw this, but before it happened, when he became Pope at the beginning of February 1198, just 1 week after its election, first decision, I give you to the Cartula Libertatis, and the possibility to be free, autonomous, to the chapter, the cathedral, to the chapter of Cathedral of Zadar. Why had he this urgent why? Just elected, he sent this document, very important, to protect Zadar, because he knew that Venetian wanted Zadar for 1 century, and it was a risk. But although this document, after the document, we know that 4 years after this document, not Venice itself, but the army of Crusader with Venice destroyed Zadar. And this is a real problem, because Pope, the very important Innocentius III, the Pope, how did he react to this? It's a way maybe to show that it is he has no power. He didn't impeach that. And it's extraordinary to see the papal diplomacy, the pragmatism of it. It is absolutely impossible for the Pope to break with Venice, because Venice is ally against the empire, against Frederick Barbarossa, and after his successor. There is this link, this relation very close between the Pope, papacy, and Venice. But Venice want Zadar absolutely for its trade, for its trade. It is economic reason. There is this destruction of Zadar. How will be the reaction of the Pope? And the Pope say to the inhabitants of Zadar, I am very sad. It is terrible. I promise you that I will excommunicate them. But it is impossible to excommunicate the Doge of Venice is ally. He writes to Venetian, to the Doge, it's not good to do that, to destroy Zadar. It was an error. Please stop it. Now, the city was destroyed. It is papal diplomacy. It is pragmatism. And they continue to say to chapter of Zadar, we are here to protect you. Although the city was destroyed. Do you understand? It's very difficult to understand, but we see it, the diplomacy, the papal diplomacy doing this job to protect its relation with Venice, but also to explain that protect also this main city of Zadar. It's difficult. The protection of the Pope is not just against destruction of army, but also in event. The first time that you hear about Dalmatia. Yes, it's normal. But you see that Adriatic is very important because it's a connected region to Mediterranean world, but also the Balkan and Central Europe, and of course Western Europe. That's why it's so important. It's so important.
Professor, excuse me, I have a question.
Thank you.
What we're talking about here, we can see a great change in the political and the power system in the Dalmatia region, right? And we're talking about the Adriatic Sea as the ambience of connection and disconnection. I think about both sides.
About?
As an ambience of connection between the regions, I think about both sides, both coasts of the Adriatic.
Both sides, yes.
but we're talking about these great changes in the Dalmatian region, and we did not talk about the Italian cities, the Italian peninsula,
Very
and
interesting
for
question.
example Rome. So when we see all this influence of the Pope and the Latin Church in Dalmatia, did it came back to Rome or some other regions in under Pope's influence in kind?
Thank you very much for this question. I try to show you what I am. Easier to understand. But I don't know if I. Yes. See this expansion of the expansion, the combination of the religious say, it's really interesting because it continued during the Middle Age. And also at the end of the Middle Age, during the Ottoman expansion, we have a migration, Slavic migration, migration in Italy because of the privileged relation between the two shores of Adriatic. It is a connected area. And here we have a Italian region called Molise. And from this period, end of Middle Age, there are a very important Croatian community. It's very interesting because today they are called I Croati del Molise. The Croati del Molise. Several thousands of persons. And they develop a dialect, a Croatian dialect in Italy today from the end of Middle Age. But this dialect seems to be Croatian not from today, but from the end of Middle Age. The conservation of this identity of this time. I don't know if I answer to this, but there are really very beautiful illustration of the privileged relation of this connected region. After that, there are, of course, a privileged relation with the city of Rome because of the reasons that I explained. And in Rome, there is, from the beginning of modern time, a church called the Church, la Chiesa dei Croati, near, I don't know if you know, l'Hôtel de la Paix, l'altare della pace, nel centro, accanto il Tibre, il Tevere. E in this church of the Croats, you have all the saints of creation. And when I was there in Rome, because I live in Rome, I learned Croat there. They have a cultural life, Croatian cultural life, and there is really in a very important Croatian communities, but it is not the same reason for religious reason in relation with the Pope and with the story that we explained. Here, there are different reasons. But yes, there is a Dalmatian culture in Italy. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado. Merci beaucoup.